It's more important to have them inside and not perish and take the risk of COVID.
Trying to keep the homeless safe as frigid temperatures grip the Fraser Valley.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We are starting to get a better sense tonight of what caused that deadly crash involving dozens of cars on the Coquihalla Highway.
The accident left a man dead and his dog dead as well, with more than 50 others hurt. Eva Gwensenge spent the day near Hope, where locals aren't surprised it happened at all on that particular stretch of Highway 5.
A deadly chain reaction crash, starting with a pickup hitting a semi-trailer. More and more drivers rounded the corner, hitting ice and losing control. By the end, at least 24 vehicles were piled up, including an RCMP cruiser.
It was really icy and somebody went into the slow lane, hit the ice and started a chain reaction and just got worse and worse and worse.
Just north of Hope, Highway 5 slopes downward around a bend. That stretch is called the S-curves, known for its tricky conditions, especially in the winter.
Well, you just got to slow down, right? That's the problem, is everybody, just because it says 120 in the summer doesn't mean that you're supposed to drive it like that.
An officer attending the crash hit a concrete barrier and watched through his rearview mirror as a semi-truck slammed into him from behind.
But yesterday it was pretty nasty.
Oh yeah? What was it like?
It was just a skating rink.
It's winter, it had snow, so you slow a bit down.
The driver of the pickup that hit the semi initially, an Okanagan man in his 40s, was killed along with his dog. Dozens of others were hurt. A busload of passengers was stranded in Hope for hours.
If you're coming from the Lower Mainland, where it was sunny and dry and clear, that you can arrive into a winter wonderland in less than 2 hours. And a simple drive, 1 hour drive normally to Merritt, it could take 4 or 5 hours if something happens on the highway and you're stopped and stuck. And so
the company responsible for maintaining the lower Coquihalla wouldn't answer questions about highway conditions because of the ongoing investigation. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Transportation says it's reviewed the activities of Emil Anderson Maintenance and says the contractor had completed a full pass of the highway stretch with plows and sanding before the accident. The province says it's still looking into whether more maintenance could have been done to prevent the crash. Eva Gwensenge, CBC News, Hope.
And crews were cleaning up today after a propane tank exploded at a Victoria homeless camp overnight, setting fire to tents and sending one man to hospital. Several tents had caught fire near the Rock Bay Landing housing complex, not far from downtown. Wood pallets under those tents were also burning, and debris around the camp made it harder for crews to put out the fire. The man taken to hospital suffered burns to his hands, arms, and head. Officials believe the fire was started by people just trying to keep warm. Temperatures dipped to -6 there last night with the wind chill.
Also last night in East Vancouver, a fire broke out in an underground parking lot along Kingsway near Boundary. The aftermath shows piles of scorched debris, and officials believe people were sheltering from the cold. It is also believed there are not any injuries.
And BC is still in the middle of a winter deep freeze tonight. Records are falling as a rare Arctic outflow warning covers much of our province.
Our Tanya Fletcher shows us how the unusually cold weather is affecting people from inland to the coast.
That sound is responsible for the coldest air Metro Vancouver has felt in more than a decade. The icy winds outside sparking a flurry of activity inside this homeless shelter in Chilliwack.
Female's jacket?
It's here the needs are most acute, enough to put pandemic protocols on the back burner.
We're only supposed to have 12 in our emergency shelter. We've had up to 24 so far, so the way we look at it, it's more important to have them inside and not perish and take the risk of COVID.
10 minutes down the road, the cold weather implications are felt in the fields too.
It's entirely possible that we could lose this arugula.
On this family farm, it's a scramble to pull these tarps turned blankets over the vegetables on the chilliest morning of the year. As the forecast plummeted this week, they quickly harvested as many carrots, beets, and potatoes as possible.
Is it frozen?
The problem now, it's so cold the veggies will freeze if they're washed, and they're due to hit the local farmers markets this weekend.
Yeah, suck it up. I mean, it is what it is.
In a coastal region not well equipped to handle blistering cold, a wind chill of -25 is a big deal.
It's rare for us to get in the right setup for this kind of extreme cold. We need winds to race through the valleys, carrying that cold air from the interior.
These are some of our Cabernet Sauvignon vines.
At Quailsgate in Kelowna, ice wine is key to their business. It has to dip to a certain temperature to be able to harvest, but it's now so cold, the vines themselves are threatened.
We have stopped pruning, and the reason for that is if it does get into that danger zone, which is really kind of in that around -20, we start to see that there's a possibility that the buds could be damaged.
And it's not over yet. A new storm is brewing off the Pacific, taking direct aim here on the south coast. It's even expected to bring record amounts of snowfall to Victoria this weekend. Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.
And meteorologist Johanna Wagstaffe joins us now live with the latest on our weather situation. Certainly a chilly one in most of the province tonight.
Yes, it is the peak of the Arctic air mass. Yes, last night and tonight they're going to be our coldest temperatures yet, and I'm feeling it out here. Definitely want your gloves. Feels like about -5 in North Van right now, and temperatures dropping rapidly across the south coast. I actually want to start off with the big picture, the whole country. I was actually chatting to meteorologist Tyler Hamilton over at the Weather Network. It's all about sharing and crunching the data, and he was looking at some of the big picture numbers, and it's always the West Coast, particularly Victoria, that has been holding the solidarity back across the country. This is only the third time that in the past century that the entire country has been below the freezing mark for more than a day. And I think if we can hold on to that minus temperature in Victoria through Friday as well, this might be an all-time record for the breadth of this cold weather system. Look at the wind chills, by the way. Definitely another side to this story. -40 is what it feels like up in Thompson, and a -17 in through Kelowna. So that air mass extending all the way down to Texas, where they had ice this morning, and all the way over towards Atlantic Canada. A really particular setup with various blocking patterns need to be in place for this to work, and it is working. Take a look at the watches and warnings across BC. We've actually seen some of them end the extreme wind chill warnings for northeastern BC as that air mass begins to sink south. Believe it or not, Fort St. John, you're a little bit warmer tonight, still in the -37 wind chills. And winter storm watch, as Tanya mentioned, for the island. That's where I'm thinking we're going to see the most snow with a system that is approaching the west coast as we speak. We get by with a dry and possibly a few sunny breaks Friday, but watch as they take you through to Saturday. That's when the moisture will move in, hitting the island first Friday night, and then crossing over to the lower mainland for Saturday. So I'm going to time that all out, talk about the flip-flopping models and our chances of making snowmen coming up.
Cannot wait. Thank you, Johanna.
You're welcome.
To BC's other health crisis now, and the latest numbers are troubling.
We've learned today last year was the deadliest year ever for drug overdose deaths in this province. More than 1,700 people died.
And as Susanna De Silva reports, advocates, families, and the chief coroner are frustrated.
You do just feel like throwing your hands in the air and saying, what's the use? But of course we can't do that. These people deserve a voice.
It's a damning indictment from BC's chief coroner, frustrated that 5 years after the declaration of a public health emergency, on average, almost 5 people a day died last year. And still, she says, basic things are missing to even formulate a plan.
We don't know still to this day in British Columbia how many people have accessed treatment or recovery services, whether they've been successful. What is the definition of success? None of that exists.
It was definitely easier in the 90s for me to access treatment and recovery than it is today in 2021.
Former user turned support worker Guy Felicella doesn't want to count the friends he lost this year.
Yeah, like if you have a heart condition and you go into the hospital, there's a continuum plan that's in place where you're going to see specialists immediately. But if you use illicit substances, it's contingent really on a prescriber's willingness to prescribe those substances.
And he says there is no coordinated support system after that, adding most of those dying are not on the streets or on the downtown east side. The Fraser Health Authority saw the most deaths of any region.
A lot of the substance users that I know that have jobs, have families, and if they do need help, they are very selective of who they talk to because of fear that they could lose their job or their kids.
It's a problem especially acute in the north, with Northern Health registering 46 deaths per 100,000 people.
People are dying at phenomenally high rates. Northern Health has continued to have the highest death rate of all the health authorities in the province, but those with the lowest amount of services to address this.
Advocates and the coroner are calling for official decriminalization and a safe supply of the drugs users need beyond the prescription alternatives to stabilize them and get them into treatment. They're also calling for those treatment programs to be standardized and regulated. The provincial government says it continues to push the federal government on the issues of decriminalization and safe supply and says progress was being made until the pandemic. But people like Felicello worry how many more friends he will lose before governments at all levels take stronger action. Susanna De Silva, CBC News, Vancouver.
And the opioid crisis is affecting many cities and towns across this province.
In fact, Seashelt on the Sunshine Coast saw a dramatic rise in the number of overdose calls last year.
Briar Stewart spoke with outreach workers making a push to address the problem.
Hey guys, do you need anything?
As an outreach worker, Hawkfeather Peterson's car is packed with harm reduction supplies.
Okay, can you jam it in your hoodie?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
I overdosed last week.
You did?
And it took them 60 minutes to revive me.
Peterson lives in Seashelt, a picturesque community of about 10,000 on BC's Sunshine Coast. While the opioid crisis might not be as visible here as in Vancouver, toxic drugs are still a problem. Something Peterson, who is also a user, knows firsthand.
I went down, and I went down hard. I actually came to, and the first thing I said to my partner was, "See, I told you it was fine." And I had no idea he had been giving me naloxone and how hard it was for him on his side.
Last year, the number of overdose calls increased by more than 100% here. There were 87.
Every community is having the same issue, no matter the size. Once we recognize that, we start then looking at what is a solution that we can take on, because it is our problem.
And there aren't enough services here to help. There's no treatment center. The only option for detox, the local hospital. Advocates want to see more support for some of the most vulnerable.
A safe consumption site opened up at this shelter last year, but it's still the only one on the Sunshine Coast, which stretches about 80 kilometers.
So to help, some physicians here and elsewhere in BC have started to prescribe safer alternatives to street drugs, and they believe that is having an effect.
The fact that we have a fairly low death rate here on the coast attests to the benefits of providing care to this population group. So I think what we're doing here to a degree is working.
But still, 4 people died of overdoses here in 2020.
Overdose isn't just killing people, it's destroying lives.
Which is why Peterson plans to keep reaching out and encouraging people to never use alone. Briar Stewart, CBC News, Seashelt, BC.
Two men are dead and a third has been rescued after a tugboat went missing off the north coast of BC last night. The RCMP West Coast Marine Unit got an emergency beacon at 12:40 a.m. to search for a tugboat in the Gardner Canal. Mounties found the first victim, and the second victim was discovered by the Canadian Coast Guard. A private helicopter spotted a survivor on a shore who has since been transported to hospital. The Joint Rescue Coordination Center in Victoria says the tug is still missing, but crews managed to retrieve the barge it was pulling.
She is out of jail in Saudi Arabia, vowing to continue her fight.
Women's rights activist and UBC graduate Lujain Al-Athulul had been detained since May of 2018.
But as Michelle Gassoub reports, her family says her own fight for full freedom is far from over.
Alia and Lina Al-Hathloul are speaking out on behalf of their sister today. Though Lujain Al-Hathloul has been released from Saudi prison, she's unable to give media interviews under the current conditions of her probation. But her sister Alia says she's relieved to see that her sister appeared in good spirits.
I think everyone will ask me if she's okay, what is her health condition. I just need to tell you that she was saying, I'm fine, everything. So I don't know if I can trust her or can believe her, but I know that she needs also time to reconstruct herself, and I'm sure she will do a great job.
Lujain Al Hathloul spent 1,001 days in Saudi jail. She's now a convicted terrorist in Saudi Arabia, a conviction she plans on appealing.
Jane is not free. She's just been temporarily released, conditionally released. What we want now is real justice, basically, that Lujain is completely, unconditionally free.
Al Hathloul also says she wants to hold her alleged torturers accountable. The Saudi state says there is no torture in this case.
She said, what did you want me to do? I had the electrocution thing on my ear, and if I would complain about anything, they were ready to electrocute me. And, you know, so I just hearing from her also is, yeah, it's heartbreaking.
Al Hathloul is now subject to a 5-year travel ban and 3-year probation. During that time, she's not allowed to use social media or to conduct any of her activism around women's rights. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Vancouver.
There have been 9 more COVID-19 related deaths in BC. Our province's death toll now stands at 1,278. Since yesterday's update, another 449 cases have been confirmed. BC's total load has now surpassed 72,000. Just over 4,300 of those are active, and 224 people are currently in hospital, 63 of them in critical or intensive care.
And some encouraging news tonight when it comes to outbreaks in long-term care and assisted living facilities. As of today, there are just 16 in total across BC. That represents a significant drop compared to this time last month when there were 51 outbreaks in care homes. As of last week, 87% of long-term care residents had been vaccinated.
And ahead of the Family Day long weekend, BC's public safety minister is reminding people that not following the provincial health officer's COVID orders can result in fines or worse. Violation tickets come with a $230 fine for individuals who break the rules and $2,300 for businesses and event organizers. And for the more egregious violations, police can recommend criminal charges. ICBC, which is in charge of collections for COVID violation tickets, says 294 tickets were issued as of January 30th, totaling nearly $270,000. But only 40 of those tickets have been paid, while the majority are being disputed. In response, Farnworth says the government is expediting collections as those fines become overdue.
The Vancouver School Board is extending the remote learning option for some students. Option 4, as it's called, allows elementary school kids to learn remotely while holding their places in school. Parents have been pushing for an extension to continue protecting their vulnerable children's health during the pandemic. The option is now being extended until the end of the school year.
And we, of course, always like to remind you that you can watch our newscast live on CBC Gem. And
CBC Vancouver is also on Facebook, YouTube, and Instagram.
COVID-19 poses a huge risk to people with developmental disabilities. After the break, we take you to one part of the country where there's a big push to make those people a top priority for the vaccine.
.18, and thanks for being with us online tonight during the television commercial break. Well, the Chinese Lunar New Year begins tomorrow. The annual tradition bringing families together, and that always means a lot of food.
A lot of food. We're going to be introducing you to some of those dishes on tomorrow's show. But tonight, Killeen Jones introduces us to a pair of friends making a big batch of one of the holiday's most celebrated staples.
Meet the dumpling divas, friends and moms, Ray Nickerson and Jessica Zhang. They're chopping, dicing, and prepping a huge batch of their handmade dumplings.
We've got mushrooms, carrots, what else? Spinach.
Making dumplings reminds them of an age-old tradition they learned back in China, and they carry on those traditions here.
Well, Chinese New Year, It's basically, it's like a Christmas here. So it's all about family getting together and cooking great food and eating, sharing. And normally on the New Year's Day, on New Year Day, we would go to the neighbor's house. It's kind of like an open house here. We say hi to all the neighbors, and the parents would give the kids some red envelopes with some little money in it. It's called a 红包. That means red envelopes.
But I find it's more like Thanksgiving. It's so emphasized the family. It's about being with your family. People from far away, they're coming home. A lot of stuff. When I was young, everything shut down. And it's all about food. You do nothing about eating, being with your family, having a lot of fun.
Disappointed with prepackaged dumplings led them to not just making their own, but they started a business. They opened in the middle of a pandemic. And the Halifax community?
I mean, Halifax people are so wonderful. They're really accepting new things and really support local.
With the arrival of the Lunar New Year, they've been hopping to fill orders.
Our dumpling is as simple as you put all the happiness, all the fortune, everything, the luck together, and a seal it is represent as the family being together. You put all the good food in there. It's just such a good. It just represent as a lot of a deeper meaning for Chinese people, lunar calendar year.
Globally, 1.5 billion people celebrate the Lunar New Year. It starts tomorrow and goes until February 26th. Colleen Jones, CBC News, Halifax.
I, for one, am very excited to indulge in some of the great food the Lunar New Year has to offer.
I, for one, am very hungry right now after watching that. Little bundles of goodness.
Gotta have some dumplings tonight.
A little hot sauce, maybe.
Hot sauce?
Oh, sure. It's good on anything, right?
Sure. All right, coming up, a push to make vaccines more available for the developmentally disabled. We've got day 3 of the Trump impeachment. Stick with us. All of that and more.
Well, Manitoba is now the first province to place its own orders for COVID-19 vaccines instead of only relying on the federal government.
So far, Canada has administered just over 1 million doses. Cameron McIntosh is looking into whether Manitoba's deal will affect the federal supply.
We were working on a COVID-19 vaccine.
It's not approved yet. Only halfway through its first clinical trial, it's not even on the government's list of leading vaccine candidates. Still, Manitoba's premier is betting on it.
This is insurance, and it's important to have insurance. Especially
Brian Pallister, openly frustrated with the pace of federal vaccine rollout, committing to buy 2 million doses of an unproven Canadian vaccine.
I want Manitobans to get vaccines, and I'd rather they got them sooner rather than later.
Calgary's Providence Therapeutics is hoping to have its mRNA vaccine approved by fall. This deal gives it cash to start producing and stockpiling doses this summer while it waits.
It's at risk. Manitoba's taken some risk, and we've taken some risk so that we can start the process earlier.
Even then, most Canadians may be vaccinated before it's approved. This was the Prime Minister earlier this week.
We are still very much on track for tens of millions of doses into the spring, and for everyone who wants to be vaccinated by September.
It's likely that we're going to have to vaccinate people every year, depending on the variants.
This expert says building domestic production is critical. Providence holds similar promise to Moderna and Pfizer.
It's essentially the same vaccine. We're talking Coke versus Pepsi.
Providence, which says it can pre-produce 50 million doses, is openly courting the provinces.
It's not off the table for Saskatchewan as well.
We need to do our homework, make sure it's technically feasible.
Look, if the feds deliver all the vaccines that they say they're going to deliver, then this is important for future pandemic responses.
The real risk here is in those vaccine trials. If it's not approved, Manitoba loses its deposit. If it is approved, Manitoba is first in line for what could be Canada's first homegrown COVID vaccine. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
An advocacy group in Yellowknife is pushing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to become a high-risk priority group for vaccines.
As Kate Kyle reports, people with disabilities have a harder time social distancing from their support workers.
Kelton Broom and his mother Barb cherish memories from a pre-pandemic vacation. When COVID-19 hit, they had to become extra cautious.
If I got sick, my immune system isn't as good as others.
Broom has autism. Keeping his bubble small is important, but not easy, because he needs a lot of help from people outside his mother's home.
People are dying.
This isn't like ha-ha funny, it's just like, oh, that carrot.
It's serious.
Some of those fears have now eased. Broom recently got his first dose of the Moderna vaccine. He's one of 23 people in Yellowknife who have developmental and intellectual disabilities to get the shot through the group Inclusion NWT. It lobbied the territorial government to make its clients a priority because they can't easily distance from support workers they need.
That puts them at a higher risk because they just can't do without that support.
It's a nationwide concern. Inclusion Canada says to date, no region in Canada has made people with developmental and intellectual disabilities who live alone or with family their own high-risk priority group.
For example, in people with Down syndrome, 4 times more likely to contract COVID-19 and over 10 times more likely to die from COVID-19. And if you look at all the jurisdictions and the vaccine prioritization, that you rarely actually see disability mentioned at all.
Let's stand up!
These days, Kelton Broom feels a bit safer working out with the Special Olympics.
But I can't wait to get a second shot.
This gives us that little bit of hope.
But advocates say many people like Broom in other parts of the country will continue to wait for that hope until more vaccines arrive and people with developmental disabilities become a priority group all on their own. Kate Kyle, CBC News, Yellowknife.
A warning today from House Democrats in the U.S. Convict Donald Trump or risk the possibility of future violence.
Democrats once again connected him to the actions of the Capitol rioters. And as Susan Ormiston shows us, they used more disturbing video to do it on day 3 of Trump's impeachment trial.
Hey, we were invited here! We were invited by the President of the United States!
Tying Trump to the rioters one after another, saying he was their commander.
If it comes down to war, guess what? I'm going to be there.
Days later, she said she was following Trump's directive.
Personally, I do not feel a sense of shame or guilt from my heart from what I was doing. I thought I was following my president.
We will stop the steal.
Prosecutors today accusing Trump of an unrelenting pattern of violent intent. When a follower he'd invited to the White House said this,
"The only good Democrat is a dead Democrat."
Trump retweeted it.
January 6th was not some unexpected radical break from his normal law-abiding and peaceful disposition. This was his state of mind. This was his essential MO.
You're a traitor to your country! Yeah! You're a traitor!
They argue he lit the fuse. His loyal foot soldiers pitted against police.
Are you an American? Act like Get the
So much for backing the blue.
Prosecutors argued that white supremacists unleashed by Trump degraded the Capitol and its people. One black officer said, "I got called the N-word 15 times today. Trump did this." A black janitor who had to clean up the mess said he felt terrible.
When he had to clean up feces that had been smeared on the wall, blood of a rioter who had died, he said, "I felt bad. I felt degraded."
Prosecutors closed their case imploring senators to convict to protect the country.
If we let it go unanswered, who's to say it won't happen again?
Tomorrow, the defense, Trump's lawyer telling Fox News the so-called trial is offensive.
It tears the country apart. Do you think it leads to healing, to show and re-show the tragedy that happened here at the Capitol, lives lost, that had nothing whatsoever to do with President Trump, but they want you to believe that it did?
Setting the stage to absolve Trump at a Capitol still bearing the scars.
That's the CBC's Susan Ormiston in Washington, D.C. tonight. Well, Ontario's students and teachers will get a March break this year, but it won't happen until April. As Ali Chiasson reports, the education minister there says postponing the break will help limit community spread of COVID-19.
Ontario is postponing March break until the week of April 12th.
According to the province, it's an effort to discourage Ontario's 2 million students and their families from traveling or gathering during their time off, something we saw over the winter break.
We recognize that congregation is a key driver of the spread of COVID-19, something we realized over the winter break, and we will not take that risk again with your child, with our staff.
At least one third grader was disappointed to learn he would have to wait a little longer for a break.
I don't really feel good about that.
Because he's been locked up since December, you know, it would have been really nice to give him that. But if we have to wait another month for it to be safer, then I'm all for it.
Opposition came from teachers' unions and some school board representatives who've expressed that they wanted March break to stay put, especially after last month of teaching online, then being back to class this week. The burnout is real.
January, I think I worked 10 times harder than I would in the classroom. Just making sure everything was up and running and making sure that everybody was online and understanding and troubleshooting. We need a break.
Whether COVID case numbers will actually be any lower in April is in question. According to modeling data released today, the highly transmissible B.1.1.7 variant is spreading and will likely soon dominate.
What happens is this starts to look like a hockey stick that it curves up, and so it's not a linear progression. It will actually curve up and up and up and become a higher and higher proportion of the cases. And as it becomes the dominant strain, you'll see it actually start to drive total cases up.
While at the same time the province gradually reopens, the onus is still on the people to keep spread down by resisting the urge to congregate and travel during any kind of time off, like March break, or as we should say now, April break. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, Toronto.
Bombardier is cutting another 1,600 jobs and scrapping its private jet production as part of a way to save $400 million U.S. annually. The Quebec-based company showed a $337 million loss in the last 3 months of 2020. About 700 of those cuts are jobs in Quebec, while another 100 are in Ontario. The company will also stop making Learjets, a business jet that has been around for almost 60 years. The total workforce left will be about 13,000 globally.
It was a bizarre and unprecedented shooting back in 2018. A police officer from Niagara Regional Police in Ontario shot his fellow officer 10 times.
A new investigation by the Fifth Estate uncovers not only the story behind the shooting, but how the incident raises serious questions about a system that allows officers with serious disciplinary records to stay on the job.
The Fifth Estate's Mark Kelly has more.
It was here on these rolling back roads where a Niagara Regional Police officer was shot 10 times by his commanding officer.
And at that point, you just think, what? How? What the hell happened?
Nathan Parker, a 30-year police veteran, survived. But after an investigation by the Ontario Provincial Police, Parker was the one criminally charged. The shooter, Detective Sergeant Shane Donovan, says he shot Parker after an altercation, fearing for his life. An investigation by the Fifth Estate revealed Parker's troubling disciplinary history. 3 convictions under the Police Services Act after violent interactions with members of the public. So why then was he still on the job the day of that gunfight with a fellow officer? Like many police departments across Canada, Niagara Regional Police don't make their officers' disciplinary records public. Police police themselves, largely in secret. Lawyer Margaret Hoy says that secrecy erodes police accountability.
It's obviously a message that doesn't matter. You can do what you want.
An Ontario review of police oversight in 2017 recommended police disciplinary hearings be handled by independent bodies with all decisions made public.
It's too important. It's too important for public confidence. And, you know, it's a civilian police force. It relies on public confidence. There are calls to defund the police. It's a complete crisis of legitimacy.
Nathan Parker's criminal trial is now set for September, and the man who shot him is now suing Parker and Niagara Regional Police for $2 million, claiming they failed to properly discipline him when they knew Parker was violent. Parker has yet to file his defense. Mark Kelly, CBC News, Toronto.
Policing the Police airs tonight on CBC television at 9 and streams on CBC Gem.
She is among the more than 1,200 that have died of COVID-19 in BC. Coming up, we remember Indigenous elder Lily Whonnock.
Got it? Put your hand up.
After 6 years and some 250 public meetings, this afternoon symbolized the official new beginning for the old Expo lands.
This is a very exciting time for us as we see Concord Pacific Place becoming a reality.
The development has undergone some dramatic changes. Originally, the plan was for a series of lagoons with islands of development.
That would have been a scheme that would have created a lot of isolation and a sense of eliteness in those islands, and that's not the Vancouver way.
The new plan is for 5 neighborhoods linked by pedestrian paths and bordered by parks. The entire site is 204 acres, and here's how it will break down. There will be high and low-rise apartments and condominiums, 8,500 separate units. Overall, 1 in 5 are designated for social housing. Already, 272 of the units are occupied, including some of those in this social housing complex, flanked by regular market high-rises. There will be 42 acres of park, 3 marinas, 2 schools, a community center, 8 daycare centers, and a waterfront walkway and bike path. It will take 10 to 15 years for the entire site to be developed. When complete, city planners predict it will resemble a combination of Vancouver's South Side False Creek development and the city's West End. As well, Pacific Boulevard will be transformed into a retail and office area, not unlike downtown's Denman Street. It is part of an overall strategy to encourage downtown living.
To make it so that we don't have to spend extraordinary money on additional commuter systems to get people in and out from the suburbs, but rather that people can live right downtown.
The project will mean another 15,000 people living downtown. That's half the size of the city's West End. There was plenty of speculation that the development was designed to appeal primarily to wealthy offshore buyers. The project's developer says not so.
We expect that so far, more than half the purchasers have been local people. We're not developing 300-foot condos. We're developing homes with water views and amenities and 10-year warranties. We're targeting at the people of Vancouver.
It's clear there will be plenty of higher-end accommodation here, though Concord Pacific won't reveal price averages yet, claiming price lists have yet to be finalized. But the developer does point out a more moderately priced complex, not yet built, where suites go on sale tomorrow.
The price of a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 850-square-foot residence with marble and granite countertops is $160,000.
The city says it would have preferred more of that moderately priced housing, and while social housing advocates are satisfied so far with the project, they say they'll continue to pressure the city to ensure social housing remains part of city developments. Kelly McClugan, CBC News, Vancouver.
Some of the stories we're following tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
What we need is really a door that opens for people to have access to a safer alternative to the illicit drug market.
The search for solutions as BC records its deadliest year yet from drug overdoses. More than 1,700 people died, almost 5 a day. It's a 74% increase from 2019. It means more people died of drug overdoses last year than car crashes, homicides, suicides, and prescription drug-related deaths combined.
I mean, this happens almost every year, right? I mean, we had the big bus accidents a few years ago too. it's just not a good stretch of highway. It needs to have some work done to it for sure.
The deadly chain reaction crash on the Coquihalla highway yesterday started with a single semi-truck. Then a pickup truck slammed into it. The pickup's driver and his dog were killed. Around 50 people were caught in the massive pileup.
During the day, we have people that come in and out all the time, but today they want to congregate inside and stay inside.
Concern for the homeless again tonight as that Arctic air mass sends temperatures plummeting here on the south coast and around the province. There's snow also in the forecast. Johanna will have all the details just ahead.
Well, she was a mother, a grandmother, and a counselor. Also an important link to Indigenous cultural traditions.
But COVID-19 took all of that away. Tonight, we look back at the life of Whonnock.
I wake up and I think, okay, what are we going to do today, Mom? But I automatically think in the morning that I'm going to go to her room. And then I remember. She was an elder in residence for two colleges, Vancouver Community College downtown and the Native Education College. And for both colleges, she was like a counselor, a loving ear to the students. So, you know, if there was something that they were going through and they wanted to talk to somebody, my mom was there. She got a medal from the Queen, you know, for all the services that she did in her community. So that speaks volumes.
We would go on little trips to Mount Currie just to visit family, and I would be like the only one she took, right? Yeah, to this day, everybody knows who I am, and it's not really like that with anyone else in my family.
You can't really say exactly how she got it, but she did get it. And it was a good 10 days before she actually even got, you know, the critical care that she needed. But that was because she was stubborn too. You know, she knew in her heart that, you know, she was strong, but unfortunately, she's definitely gone too soon. And that's going to be really hard for a lot of people. Wash your hands, stay home, don't go out if you don't need to. I can't stress enough, look after yourself.
Okay, I know we think it's cold here, but things are far worse in other parts of the country. After the break, we look at how the homeless are staying warm in a polar vortex.
And at 6:42, there's a live look at from Grouse Mountain tonight. A beauty looking down on our city. Temperatures on top of the mountain tonight about -10. Yes, it's a cold one today, and it's getting even colder tonight right across the province. And there's also snow in the forecast. Johanna's forecast is next.
Hello, my name is Natalie Bell, also known as Peg City Lovely, and I am super excited to be talking with Brooke Van Rysel.
Oh, sorry, you froze on me.
I know, it froze for a sec. I was like, that's what we're gonna have to deal with. In your definition, if you could give My Body Peg a one-sentence definition for people to understand what it is, what would you say?
Bottom line, we are a body-inclusive gym.
Imagine walking into a gym where all bodies and all humans are welcome and celebrated.
We don't subscribe to any of the diet culture garbage, any body shaming. You know, we are actively anti-racist, we are actively anti-ableist, we are against all forms of fat phobia, we are pro-fat liberation, just trying to create an accessible and inclusive fitness environment.
That is so prevalent, especially in social media. And so I'm so happy that you've broken through that.
I'm in my workout gear and I'm about to do a workout with Brooke from My Body. Super excited.
First, we're gonna warm up. We've got a cardio workout, so a little bit of an upstairs, downstairs kind of day. We're gonna do upper body and then a little bit of lower body as well. 10 more seconds. Keep it going.
I just love seeing the different ways that you bring joyful movement to the community and to the table, because people need that even more now than ever.
With COVID and with the isolation and, this year, I've never seen diet culture in this type of full force action before. It is deeply alarming. The quarantine 15, it's such garbage.
Yeah.
The New Year's detoxes, the New Year, New You, it's all the same crap, but it's even further amplified this year because the diet industry thrives off our vulnerability.
It's that vulnerability. And in the pandemic right now, that vulnerability is so fragile.
I'm going to be very blunt. Diet culture is a product of white supremacy. And that is still what's being promoted in the education programs and in a lot of fitness facilities. And that is a very hard pill to swallow for a lot of people because, for folks who want to be actively anti-racist, they don't want to be a part of that.
It's like what I'm about to ask you right now. I'm like, you're just segueing so perfectly into what I'm thinking about here.
Woo! We did it.
It's all about that accessibility.
I love it. Thank you so much, Brooke.
To unmute themselves. And we're all gonna put our hands in the center. I'm gonna say 3, 2, 1. You're gonna say, because I love my body. Ready? Hands in. 3, 2, 1. Because I love my body. Yay! We did it. Awesome work.
Well, springtime could not come any sooner for gardeners, as the harsh chill of the Arctic air could put plants in jeopardy. Cold snaps are a challenging time for those with green thumbs. Arctic air makes plants susceptible to frost, which generate icy crystals that can weaken their root systems, unlike how snow can provide a layer of insulation.
And a gardener in Victoria advises the best way to protect your plants is to prepare ahead. She says use mulch or compost to insulate the roots to try to keep them as warm as possible.
The space indoor or in the garage, it's best to bring the plants inside.
And she also warns not to water your plants during the cold snap. There you goes.
I can barely keep my plants alive inside my house. Although I shouldn't say this as my farmer father watches.
That's true. Hey, those were some good tips. Yeah, I think I'd be doing a few things wrong.
Yeah.
You'd think I would think about it as a scientist, but yes, the watering, that was a good one, especially as we head into another night of minus potentially double-digit temperatures. And I know we were just seeing the first blooms last week. This cold snap, there is an end in sight. I want to start off with the forecast temperatures for overnight. I'm actually starting you off at midnight. These are model temperatures. I think they're doing a pretty good job, though. You can see dipping down to the -6, -7 range across Metro Vancouver. We'll see the coldest of the temperatures between 6 and 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. That's right when we're expecting to see those Arctic outflow winds really kick in again through the morning. They're always strongest with the diurnal impact in the morning hours. So wind chills are going to be approaching the -12 to -15 range tomorrow morning. Okay, let's get to that snowfall forecast. This is a look at the European model. We're starting to see the high resolution models tomorrow, the day before the event. That's when we get our rapid update models coming through, and it'll give us a better idea of who's getting what. But the European one doesn't do a bad job on the long range. Look at Vancouver Island, Victoria in the 10 to 20 centimeter mark. The lower mainland in the 5 to 10 centimeter mark. So there is quite a bit of variability. Some of the latest models to come in today showing just traced to a couple centimeters for Metro Vancouver. And again, the longer range American models still putting us closer to the 15 centimeter mark for Vancouver. So yeah, that's a big range, 2 to 15 for Vancouver, but I'll be honing it in tomorrow as we get the latest model runs. Lots of sunshine tomorrow across the province. Still looking at that Arctic air holding strong, but watch as I take you through that polar vortex forecast. So this is a snapshot of the upper levels of our atmosphere, but the whites, that's the core of the vortex, moving eastward as we head into next week, and thus the Pacific temperatures making a comeback for Sunday as snow changes over to rain. Back to seasonal by the time we hit midweek next week. So there's an end in sight no matter how you feel about this.
Well, that is very good to hear. We'll look forward to it. Thanks, Joe.
You're welcome.
And as cold as it is here in the prairies, a polar vortex, as Joe mentioned, continues to hold people in its icy grip, and that has triggered concerns for vulnerable populations.
Leonard Monkman has more from Winnipeg, where a coalition of Indigenous volunteers has come together to help the homeless stay warm.
Take it up at the bottom and we lift up.
EJ Fontaine brought his teepee to the Thunderbird House to help those who've been sleeping in bus shelters. Concerned about the situation, he and his wife decided to spring into action. They put out a call for donations, warm clothing, and set up what is now being called the Community Caring Camp.
It's intended to provide a safe, warm place for homeless people. And, majority of the homeless people are our people, Indigenous people, so we want to make sure that they're safe and they have a place to come when this cold snap is here. Because the last thing we want to see is our people dying, freezing out in the streets.
The camp includes 2 teepees and a prospector tent, all heated with firewood donated from the community. In just a few days, they have received hundreds of dollars in donations to buy things like winter boots, toques, ski pants, and mitts. The work is being led by Winnipeg's grassroots Indigenous community, including Riley Niepenak.
The community is coming together in response to somebody freezing and passing away because of the harsh cold. We're coming together to provide a safe space where people can warm up, get some food in their bellies, and get some warm supplies as well.
While the organizers understand that this is a temporary solution, they would like to see a long-term strategy in place to help the homeless population.
I'd like to see more affordable housing for them, maybe apartments where they can live. I mean, I've seen in other cities, and I've traveled a lot in other cities. They take real efforts to try and provide affordable housing for homeless people.
Organizers and volunteers plan to keep the fire burning and to hand out donations for the next 2 weeks. Leonard Monkman, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Lost in transfer. Not the words a Winnipeg cat owner was hoping to hear about his cat Dewey. The cat wandering Pearson Airport in Toronto. The good news, Dewey is back home tonight. I'll tell you how he's doing next.
Sean Liang. I come from China. I'm the owner of this bakery. The bakery is Lucky Bakery.
My first name Bao and last name Trump. We come from Vietnam. The restaurant name Non La Coffee Shop. This Friday for Vietnamese or for Asian, we have Lunar New Year. Prepare special food for the New Year only.
We prepare some Chinese desserts for some traditional cake for the Chinese Lunar New Year.
The last week, they order so many foods for the New Year. Busy, but very happy.
When this time, a lot of people want home dessert, home taste. A lot of people can stay together and talk some story around this year, so can share for everyone. And have a video call for my family who live in China.
I think every people can see that other parents, grandparents, relatives, or friends, healthy, happiness, and successful New Year.
I made a promise to myself and I don't want to break that promise.
I gave myself the challenge to complete 1,000 pull-ups. Try and raise money for Big Brothers Big Sisters Calgary. The last year was kind of tough for me. It's been tough for everybody, and I've had a lot of time on my hands, so I thought I should put all that time to good use and try and focus my negative energy onto something positive. I joined their mentoring program in 2018. So we'd hang out once a month, just do like activities, go to movies, go to the rink, stuff like that. And it was a very eye-opening experience for me. It's very humbling, kind of being there for somebody. I really enjoyed it. I think he did a lot more for me than he probably realizes. But it's very eye-opening to give your time to somebody else. And I just really enjoyed it. And it's a great organization. They do a lot of good for the people in the city. And I worked with them, so I felt like they would be the perfect choice to give the money to. My body will definitely quit before my mind does, so it's gonna be a mental battle for sure. It's what it's gonna come down to. I've never done anything like this, so I'm excited to see how I'll react. Failure is not an option, so I'm planning on doing it. Planning on doing more, hopefully.
How you feeling, buddy?
Pretty good. 1,000 easier than I thought.
Yeah, what was your final count?
1,020.
I have a confession to make. I'm not sure who I am. I'm 19, and I'm half Indigenous and half white. My name is Jeremy Ratt. Pieces is a CBC British Columbia original podcast where I go on a journey to discover who I am and where I belong. There's racist stereotypes, cultural appropriation, relationships, acceptance. Pieces, arriving February 18th. Subscribe today.
Well, doing math is not every kid's idea of a good time. It's not my idea of a good time.
Yeah, mine either, that's for sure. But a 9-year-old boy is showing the world how math becomes fun if you mix in some yummy treats.
The Ontario boy is the star of Marshall's Creations, a Facebook broadcast where he gets to practice his fractions while whipping up tasty recipes. Take a look.
We're making lemon meringue pie fudge.
Marshall does have ADHD, and he was given some special testing, and they suggested that we find something that he really loves and try to get him to encourage him to do things that way. So typically if Marshall was to read a book, he would give up after a few pages, but he peeked at the book fair and saw a Minecraft cookbook, and he seemed to be really interested with it. So I got that for him for Christmas, along with his little hat and his apron that we got personalized.
Well, it has been making me a better reader. I'm a very good math person. We're gonna need 3 cups of chocolate chips.
So we're a large family of 8. So a lot of recipes we sometimes have to double, which is great for math. So we have to do K times 2 or this plus this. There's a lot of fractions, which is great. He's excited when he goes to school. He typically would shut down if there's something that he doesn't know how to do. But this year he has really kind of come out of his shell a bit more.
All of the things that I get back from people are very inspiring for me. And it's pretty nice that people are saying stuff about my food. It makes me feel confident about my work. It kind of makes me feel like I'm actually a chef in a restaurant.
Look into whatever it is that they are passionate about. You have to find what's right for them. Once you see that spark, you really have to go for it. Don't let it die out, right? Too many people take things that their kids do and maybe they make a big mess, big deal. The mess can be cleaned up, right? But the encouragement and the self-esteem that he's gaining is well worth the extra 10, 15 minutes of cleanup.
Here's the actual finished part of our creation for Marshall's Creations.
I was hungry half an hour ago when we had our Chinese New Year dumpling thing. Now I'm still hungry,
Well, if it wasn't COVID, I'd say let's go grab a bite, but
well, that's true.
It's not happening.
Before we do that, we're going to leave you with a happy ending to a story we've had our paws on for some time now.
A cat on the lam for more than 3 weeks in the baggage area of Toronto's airport is now back home in Winnipeg. Dewey was returned to his owner yesterday, a little worse for wear. Riley McCann says the first thing he did was give his tabby a bath.
He had pooped in his crates because he was afraid. He was covered in dirt. He was like gray and black and just covered in soot and ash and a bunch of gunk from the warehouse where he was lost in for the last 3 weeks.
And McCann was moving back to Winnipeg when Dewey went missing at Pearson International. He says Air Canada has offered to cover any vet bills arising from that ordeal, but what McCann really wants is for Air Canada to change the way it handles live pets and stop treating them as checked baggage.
Dewey is so cute. Can't stop looking at him.
Yes, good to be back.
Glad he's safe home.
All right, just a reminder, you can always watch our newscasts online anytime, cbc.ca/BC.
Dan is here at 11 after the National. Have a good night.
Good night.